Lines that are shaping the narrative in South Sudan. We delve into issues related to national development, peace building, politics, culture and economics. To stay informed and engaged, tune into Around South Sudan and be part of the conversation that matters. Subscribe now and join us for the stories that connect us all. Together, let's explore the heart of South Sudan. Welcome to Around South Sudan. You go to podcast for the stories that shape our nation. Each week we explore the most impactful headlines that are shaping the narrative in South Sudan. We delve into issues related to national development, peace building, politics, culture and economics. Hello, my name is Lasuba Memo. Welcome to Around South Sudan podcast. Today we focus on the bold decisions or reforms that is sweeping through the South Sudan People's Defense Forces under the leadership of the Chief of Defense Forces, Dr. Paul Nang. From house to house weapon search to crack down on armed youth in Jonglei and Warabi State, and also to the evacuation of armed youth at a fishing ground in Jonglei State, to ending what we call ghost names in the army payroll, and also banning of soldiers from stealing food that belongs to the army. This has been widely received positively by members of the public, although it is overdue. However, some critics are keen about this step, as they say there is potential abuse of rights during the process. But is this a turning point for accountability and an end to impunity in the army system? Well, today I am glad to be joined by civil society activist Edmond Yakani, who is also a governance advocate, to unpack this move taken by the Chief of Defense Forces. It's my pleasure having you on this platform, Edmond Yakani. And maybe the first question to you is, what is your interpretation of the latest series of reforms, if you will call, announced by General Paul Nang? Are they a positive step toward accountability or just a reaction to recent security pressures?
It is a mixed reaction to your question. Partly is positive, partly is questionable. Positive where, for instance, the collection of arms in illegal hands in Juba City. We might have seen the arms that the military were able to collect from the hands of illegal holders, and they were able to display them. And this time around, at least, they were also able to give more further information around the arms, like how many of the arms they have collected illegally from the hands of the people, or what do you call arms that have been held illegally by people in Juba City that have collected. They're able to give us more detailed information. How many of them belong to national security? How many of them belong to the military? How many of them are registered? How many of them are not registered? How many of them are held by individuals who claim they're soldiers but they're not soldiers? How many of them were found just with civilians that neither they have been registered, neither they have been claimed by any civilian, neither they belong to any either of the institution, neither to national security, neither to the military. That's something positive, something that is impressive, something that we appreciate, and we give thanks to the CDF for making that move, not him alone, but him and his other counterparts in the security sector, and I hope that will continue. Now, with that, the next follow-up question with this particular development is, this is not the first of its kind that something like that has happened in Juba. So the question is, why should the arms that were collected always recycle or find its way back to the hands of the civilians? Because it's not for the first time these arms have been collected. We did a bit of analysis. We tried to follow whether the rifles that were collected in this particular round of the disarmament are same rifles that we keep seeing in the years back. Remember, always towards Christmas, there's a city search. Right. Almost the same rivals start coming in. So the question comes is about the storage, management, and administration of these weapons. If they're collected like this, they've been displayed like this, were they been properly stored? Were they registered? Are there leakages within the security institutions that same weapons that were collected find its way? So as we appreciate the collections, we appreciate the transparency in terms of displaying what type of weapons, to which institutions, to who, how they find them, that these are illegal weapons. But also the next question is, why should this case repeat itself annually? How do you control? Because, for instance, if some of the weapons belong to National Security Service, it means these weapons were being purchased by our revenue supposed to be for ultimate safety and security of civilians. So why should somebody run away with it from the stores? How does it find its way from the store to the hands of illegal hands? Or are there deserters within these security institutions? Then if they're deserters, why should the deserters desert with guns? Where is a system of tracking or following the presence of rivals or weapons in the hand of the members of the security institutions? So if some of them desert, they're supposed to be followed up. So that, for me, become a question of how is a system of administration for the storage and safety of that when these weapons want to find its way to the hands of civilians. So that is the positive side of it. Come to the ghost names. Ending the ghost names in the military, it is something impressive that CDM has been pushed for. It's something that we like it to be there. But the question, is it a first of its kind? Obviously, no. So how can he do this time more better, that he end the ghost names and these ghost names will not come back again into the payroll? Because military institutions or security institutions have huge ghost names, and these ghost names are taking huge chunk of money that could have helped in either saving money for pension of the aged soldiers that are beyond pension age. You can see now we have some elders who are soldiers, some generals who are really aged. They have gone past pension age. They're supposed to be pension so they can go there. That's why we have so many generals that are, the pension become a problem. So they keep on get the promotion. So for me, one side is positive, one side is negative. That's one thing I like to say. But some part of the reforms that are totally questionable is one, why should we start striking armed youth with gunships? So that for me is a bit disturbing. And why always disarmament were being carried out in those areas? If you see these areas that there's a warnings going, there's a consistent disarmament, even in intervals of annually, at least after every 2 years or after every 3 years. How many times have Dongole been disarmed? How many times have the side of Tonch been disarmed? Multiple times it's been armed. That's one thing that I like really to be taken up seriously, that we need to ask questions. Why are these groups coming? Obviously, someone like me as an activist, I reach out to some of these groups, being it the Red Bell or being the armed youth in Tonj. Most of them will tell me, look here, we are community defense force. Then ask, why are you community defense force? They normally have a common answer across the board. The common answer is that the state is not provide us adequate safety and security. And that's why when you see, when the CDF won the Red Bell to surrender their arms or get integrated into SPDF, what they say, we are community defense force, we operate with the community, but we are not ready to give our arms if you don't ask our counterparts, they're more ready to give their arms. So it's a question of what? That we are standing up to protect ourselves from certain communities that we constitute them or we view them as enemies, either due to armed cattle raiding or due to whatever robbery or whatever theft activity that it involved the use of arms in the hands of the civilians. So for me, that's the question, is that if you want to collect these arms for sustainable or durable solution, then the state need to play a big role in providing safety and security to civilians. But safety and security for you to provide to civilians, then you need to discipline politics play in this country. The politics we're playing in this country is that we're playing politics where violence is an instrument of playing political cards in order to either retain power or have access to power. So that scenario of where politicians or political elites are using violence in order to access power. For example, you see the seat of the governorship. Some governors are removed, either violence is created for them to be kicked out, or some governors have retained power by creating violence. Or some county commissioners who have been doing that. It's common if you go across the country. So for me, for how long will you be striking this youth? This is one. Two, you are actually also contributing in multiplying these groups that are what you would term as an armed group or community defense force. So instead of using military solution to their discontented position, why don't you use a dialogue? Instead of threatening them, why don't you use a dialogue? Why don't you...
I'm sure you participated in some of those community
Of course, of course.
Over these years, dialogues have been
used.
And
I facilitated quite a number of them.
Why haven't those dialogues actually brought about positive change?
You know, there's a trend, and this trend, I don't know if people will get it clear. This trend is my observation. There's a trend that institutionalizing politics in this country is losing its meaning. What I mean? For instance, if you want to play politics in any state, like state of South Sudan, you're supposed to play this politics by having political institutions. And political institutions that internally have a democracy. So, our political institutions lack internal democracy. So this shapes the political parties to be dominated by individuals, by cliques, not by political ideology. So what does that give birth to? That have given a birth to community tribal associations. Now, community tribal association become a playing field for politics. For you to calculate your politics, you might have seen the waging of elections around and all this at community level. So you see, they become an alternative. They become a playing field there. Now, when they become a playing field there, they are building political orientation, political nurturing, political build-up of an entity. Now, when we go more community, actually, the more we are widen the scope of whom we define as our opponent. Now, when we widen the definition of what we define as an opponent, from getting down to our communities, to subsection of our communities, as a political establishment, there's a likelihood that actually our own community members that are members of the security institutions become a supplying source for our defense capability. And that's why you can see the weapons of national security in the hands of community members. You can see if you see this armed, what is called armed youth groups of vigilante, if you look at them, the arms they're carrying, some of them are more latest that were purchased by revenue of the country. So, but how do they get it? It is their own community members that are in the security institutions that sneak these weapons to their hands. But those who sneak the weapons to the hands of communities, they become the godfather of those particular establishments. While for them to be felt as they are a godfather, they start shaping politics. So if we want to deal, for example, with a particular armed group, there might be a particular politicians behind it. And that poses a threat to the top leaders of the country, that if you mishandle this politician, then you're actually triggering these groups to become a negative force against your leadership. So you start compromising and you start giving in. That's why over and over hundreds of peace dialogues that were carried out the country couldn't hold. Why? Because some of those dialogues have been used by some of the political class as an opportunity of climbing ladder to power, or as an opportunity of removing somebody out of power. That's why you see all these dialogues that you sign today, tomorrow is violated. It's the same thing like the political act you have around the access. So South Sudanese are very good at that. South Sudanese plan today and they forget the planning tomorrow. They sign the agreement today, they violate immediately tomorrow. So this comes from an angle that political establishment in this country does not hold.
So what is the best approach? Because you, on the one hand, you're saying the step being taken by the army to disarm them is not the right one, and you're saying dialogue is an option. But again, it is very difficult, as you said, for these dialogues to actually produce results, because of what you have actually explained, that there is no internal democracy in political parties, and so it gives people who do not have the chance within those parties to go behind communities to create this conflict, such that this dialogue comes and they begin campaigning for.
Of course.
Yes. So what is the best approach?
Listen, by the virtue of mandates, what CDF is doing is within his mandate. So CDF is not mistaken. Whatever, because overall mandate of CDF, or overall mandate of somebody like IGP of police, or overall mandate of somebody like Director General of National Security for Internal Affairs, is to ensure safety and security of civilian population. So championing disarmament by principle, it's their mandates. And that is completely not a problem, that's not completely a violation. The question comes, how do you want to carry out the process of the disarmament? And if you're carrying out the process of disarmament, do you take into account who are you disarming? Does the person you're disarming having an opponent somewhere? Can you go for that's why this place of comprehensive disarmament is required. Or disarmament where you target the conflicting parties in that particular territory simultaneously or equally. So it means if there's a party A, party B, you can't disarm B to be vulnerable to A, or you can't disarm A to be vulnerable to B. You handle both of them simultaneously. That practice is not a problem. But also, if you're going to disarm, then it is upon your responsibility to embrace rule of law, to embrace respect of human rights. But our problem is that if you start using gunship strikes as a message of we're going to disarm you because you are indisciplined, the question comes that you have civilian population that are innocent. They are neither members of these vigilante groups or armed groups, they may fall as victims, like what happened in Tonch East. And that's what people are calling that. Please have a better approach. That's one thing that I have. The second thing, that for these dialogues to hold, this dialogue need leadership. For me, the prerogative of disciplining the political class and discipline the gun class, it is a primary responsibility of His Excellency President. Some of them are his friends, who are close allies to him, who claim to be supporting your leadership, were close to you, that the one, whenever the president comes, the one shouting the slogans and all this, while behind the curtains, that the same people who are digging a hole for the president. So His Excellency President need to undertake a responsibility of disciplining the politicians around him, because if he's not careful, they beat these drums that we are friends, you are your allies, we protect you, we work for you, but at the same time, they're destroying the image of the leadership of the country in the eye of the civilians. Because let me ask you, this violence we're taking on now, all these wars, these strikes, these gunships that we're shooting, if we convert them into school, how many people have left the guns and have gone to vocational centers if we turn this money into a developmental approach? Okay, if we say, for instance, one thing that is disturbing me, my brother, for instance, let's talk about the politicians that are engineering violence in this country. If I'm not mistaken, 80 or 90% of them are originating from the background of the SPLM, isn't it? During the struggle, all of them merged from that background. Now, if you see when 1983 until 2005, when we signed the agreement, there's a two principal philosophy of the SPLM when they're fighting. One, we need to take towns to the villages, isn't it? So what does that mean? That means we are working towards actions that make population to migrate from urban towns to rural areas. But to the contrary, we are actually working on strategies that make people migrate from rural areas to urban towns. It's a contradiction to that particular ideology or philosophy. The philosophy of also that we need to have peace through development is a written document that SPLM was saying, if we take responsibility, or politicians who are behind the flag of SPLM since 1983 until 2005, before they split up into different groups, there's a philosophy that we want to bring peace through development. Opposite, we want to bring peace through violence. And that's why some of us have been shouting that actually believing on using military strategy to resolve political differences, it is a total crisis, is a curse, is a disaster. So the best way is that you need to use dialogue to resolve political crisis. Now, if you want to use dialogue to succeed, dialogue never succeeds in any society where the leadership of that particular society does not hold people to remain accountable to their commitment to the provisions of the dialogue or the outcomes of the dialogue. And then also it requires a leadership that follow the outcome of the dialogue to be executed. How many money we have wasted on dialogue, that dialogue is constituted by a presidential decree through a committee? Where is the results? So if a decree to issue, constitute a committee, give them resources, they go for dialogue. That's the data of the process. So what are the outcome of the dialogue? What are the results of the dialogue? Who is supposed to implement the dialogue? To what level is dialogue being implemented? Those particular questions, those particular commitments, we are lacking. And that's why for me, the CDF is trying to exercise his mandate with his colleagues in the defense security sector, but the success to that, to be in a non-violent manner, require a leadership of the country to undertake responsibility.
There is what you call notoriety, the armed youth being notorious. Many warnings were issued. They were told, surrender your guns voluntarily, and some of them have not actually lived up to that. And in any war situation, there are those who argue that you expect collateral damage.
Obviously,
given the youth are actually said to be, some of them are more armed than our organized forces.
And then number two, also, this is what the youth sometimes, we also abuse it so much. So I'm one of the person who is disputing us only constituting that these are armed youth. So we're abusing the word youth. Some of these people are past youth age. Okay, if you look at our youth policy that was defined, that a youth in South Sudan is between the age of 15 to 35. Some of them are past that age. Some of them are actually professional army who deserted, who are discontented. These are well-trained professional soldiers with our own resources. They deserted the institutions, they go behind the communities. You see, some of them are not actually even deserting that simply because there's no job. They deserted for political ground. Some politicians mobilize them, you leave these public institutions, go to the community institutions, and some of them even are well paid than being paid in the public institutions under these so-called armed groups of vigilante community. You see, so this particular merging of these groups that are coming up, it is a result of when you have politics in discriminative manner. When you have what we call, when political establishment are exercising discriminative political practices, normally end up like that. It's a case study in so many countries. It's a case study in DRC, it's a case study in Somalia, where politics are being designed in a way that discriminate a certain class of the party members, a certain class of the society, a certain communities. What do you do? And normally when you play discriminative politics, what normally comes into the mind of the people? What comes to the mind of the people is that your voice cannot be heard until you establish a what? A military wing. You need to show muscles. So your voice will be counted when you show a muscle. And it have succeeded. Where have it succeeded? You see how do you have greater people administrative area? Okay, that is it. It's military muscle that shows that. So everybody start building militias, everybody start building a military wing. You have seen Uncle Kenyilo Brong now in the bushes here of Wondurba. He's still there. So people hesitant to go to that area. So you have a new political culture that politicians feel we are hard when we have a military wing or when we have a backup of a military group. That's what happened. For example, I'll give you an example. Some people on the street of Juba is saying, His Excellency Vice President Wanega was kicked out because he doesn't have a militia. If he's supposed to have a militia, he could have actually not been tampered with. That's the common street of Juba is saying. So it becomes an attitude. Where does that come from? That comes from when politics become discriminative. That comes from when people feel politics is no longer diverse, politics is not accommodative. And that's what comes when political establishment does not respect ethics, principle and guideline of a political party with regard to political engagement, transferring party members from a party to a government. You know the process of transferring a party members from a party to a government. If you mess up with it, what do you expect? You expect violence. Me and you, when we come to the party, I came earlier, I registered 3 months ago, I stay here, I pay quite number of, I engage, I develop policies. You came 2 years or 3 years back before me, you registered and I oriented you. From nowhere, I finally become my boss. And I asked my friend, what happened to the queue? Who cracked the queue? So the way you jump the queue motivate me to look for best way to deal with you. So this is completely a result of discontented political positions. So we should not so much abuse the word youth so much, but also we should say that these are vigilante groups that are composed of everybody.
One thing, how do you transform this?
It's obviously, it's a leadership issue. It's a leadership issue to transform this. How does leadership transform this? That's why I'm one of the person who is calling that it's only need one decision of His Excellency President to commission dialogue. Of course, this call His Excellency to commission dialogue, it has so many spoilers and resistance from the individuals close to him. They don't hear this because dialogue is a chance that expose them. Dialogue is a chance that give them no way to manipulate things. Dialogue may block them from their aspirations, so they will object it. So it is his. Let me give examples. Are there examples that dialogue have worked and have fixed a challenging moment? I'll give you a few things. Look at Chukudum, 1994. If it wasn't dialogue, what could have happened? Look at Wunli. If it wasn't dialogue, what could have happened? Look at Kejiko. If it wasn't dialogue, what could have happened? Look at Rumbek, prior to CPA. What happened between His Excellency President and late Dr. John Garang? If it wasn't Rumbek, it wasn't dialogue, what happened? Look at our independence. And now, when President take a top leadership, His Excellency President Salva, when he take a top leadership, he have 3 incidences of wisdom where he used dialogue. Which one? When we were prior independence, you remember there's so many militias that were designed by Khartoum. What did His Excellency President Salva did? He commissioned the South-South dialogue. He commissioned until people have said, Yajamana, we have our common interests. Whatever the case, and that's why the South-South dialogue was able to create an enabling environment for us to go for referendum, and the results were counted without any counter force within South Sudan because it's our own process. That's wisdom number 1. Wisdom number 2, 32 states. When people are pursuing the 2 states, what happened? People are in Freedom Hall, the 2 way, he went, he issued an order. Because he gave people dialogue and he realized people are talking inside the dialogue, then he constituted that's one of the wisdom that he did, and it have clearly sorted out a problem. So you can see that there's already positive products of dialogue, but dialogue is something that in the current context where you have beneficiaries or profiteers of the violence, they don't want to hear the word dialogue. And specifically when profiteers of the violence becoming more powerful and they start dictating, there's these things what people used to call in politics state capture. When you have a state capture in the hands of the spoilers of peace and stability, when you state capture in the hands of people who does not want to see transparency and accountability, when you have a state capture by individuals that does not respect any more rule of law and respect of human rights, when you state capture with people who believe that actually atrocities is an instrument of asserting themselves or himself or herself, where they believe military strategy is the best solution to political crisis. We don't want to sit on the table because I don't want to be checked. this is the consequences that we are in now. So for me, it is upon His Excellency President, with due respect and honor, to commission a dialogue. Even you don't need a dialogue that you go to Addis, you go everywhere. Dialogue from within here. Let's just go to Nyokron of Freedom Hall, where we see now is a center of trial. Let's say, even if not there, let's go to any plain field, even Dariada, or even the what do you call, the Freedom Square. Let's talk. The moment we sit on the table, we talk, we can insult ourselves, we can shame each other, but at the end of the day, we'll end up with results that claims no life of any single South Sudanese, that there will be no atrocities registered, like what we have seen, what happened in Nasser, in Ulang, during the March period until now, like what's going on in Tonj, or whatever we're going to expect to happen in Jungle. We'll never see those incidences. But we'll talk to ourselves, and we'll respect, and we'll bring back the system, the structural way of how we want what is defined as public governance through constitutional approach. We'll embrace that. Because right now, some people are so happy in seeing public governance managed through crisis. They create one crisis after another crisis as a strategy to manage public governance. That is a disaster.
So you're suggesting that having a permanent constitution in which every South Sudanese see themselves, and not just having a constitution, but also a constitution that is respected and that is implemented, will to some extent help reduce these kind of intercommunal conflicts that we see, because everyone will have to abide by what the constitution says.
Exactly.
And so
and let me tell you, constitutional making process by itself is a dialogue by nature, because the consultations that you're going to undertake with the citizens, asking citizens, what type of constitution do you want, what type of governance do you want, what type of peaceful coexistence, what are the values that you need to have, how do you define, what do you define as a state, what do you define as a nation, what do you define as a country. All these dialogues by itself, it will bring good results. Look at the national dialogue. The national dialogue, when it was going on, it suppressed violence, by the way. I don't know if people realize. Okay, if you see the period we have wasted under the chair of Angelo Beda in the national dialogue, communal violence have suppressed. Almost everybody's following. Where are they now? Where they come? So if you see that experience, that even holding a national dialogue at that particular period have reduced level of communal violence. And if you want to prove this, read UNIMIS reports around the death of citizens due to armed communal violence. If you see that particular period of national dialogue, the numbers are completely low. It means people are ready to peacefully coexist if they're given the space to express themselves. But the moment you deny people to express themselves freely, you want them to express themselves under restriction, precondition, violence take presidency, and violence become an option of they expressing their grievances. So that's why we're calling upon that it is upon His Excellency President, I repeat myself, with due respect and honor, that he should commission dialogue. And dialogue is the only way we can go through. And if we commission a dialogue, that dialogue needs assertive leadership. Leadership that will never compromise, will never hear for interpretation. Because if you see the way how the national dialogue failed, it's just something that was picked up as a resolution. People say, let the president and the current first vice president who's undergoing trial distance themselves from politics. Somebody ran, oh, they say you should go. How does a person go? You should take time to consume that particular recommendation. How do we accept? Is it now? Is it tomorrow? Is it next 5 years? Is it next 10 years? How do we do this? Nobody want to ask those questions. Just somebody run with it to say, hey, say, stop it, block. You give yourself time to understand. You know, today if I told you that I don't need to see you in iRadio, that doesn't mean I'm dismissing from iRadio. So there's a process. I need to reach to the leadership. I need to discuss with the leadership. They may need to ask me. I need to convince them. This may take time. It's a time interval that sometimes it's longer. But because South Sudanese are emotional, and normally when you have a political system where its members does not hold respect to their internal rules and regulations, political defections become a principle. And whenever in a society, political defections become an instrument of establishing political functioning in the state, violence take presidency. You cannot stop it. You know, violence take dominance. So for us to come down and for us to really mitigate the current context we're in, the political stalemate we're in, is actually for politicians to go back to the political establishment, respect the principle of political establishment. Alongside that, you need to have an assertive leadership, committed leadership that have the will to deliver the outcome of what people are expecting from the leadership, a leadership that will deal with those who want to contradict what we call the common interests of the nation. Because, let me tell you, any leadership, even here in iRadio or in SEPO, like in South Sudan, if you are unable to secure the unity of your citizens, the unity of your staff as an institution, then what is your first mandate as a leader? Leadership mandate number one is to secure unity of its own citizens. And that's why the president was saying, under my leadership, I will not return the country back to war. To war. But the spoilers below him have returned the country already to war. Some parts of the country, we see what is happening in Kediba here, what's happening in Morobola. So, not the language, if you see now, there's a language that coming out that we have repelled the enemy, we have recaptured from the enemy, and then these are signatories to our access. Okay? Spokesman of IO is issuing a statement on one side, we have recaptured, we have seized this amount of weapons, the enemy attack us, we're going there. And then this one here also is saying in the SSPDF, the certain sides of the enemies have joined us, have defected, have joined us, and people are celebrating that. And now here, you are saying we are not in war, we are in war already. The country have restarted, certain parts of the country are witnessing active war. Where does this come? Why should this contradict the statement of His Excellency President? And His Excellency President is not himself. He is a symbol of the nation. He represents us. He portrayed the image of South Sudan. But when you have subordinates that are below the leadership and they're not disciplined and they can run away with mistakes, they can run away with atrocities, then that means we cannot hold peace and stability. So for me, for us to hold peace and stability require assertive, committed, and leadership that tracked and discipline those who does not adhere to what we describe as a common interest of the nation, which is normally peace and stability. Development will follow from there.
Right. Let's talk about the ghost name. Let me return you to what he said earlier. He said it's a good step because if the military leadership tried to do that, and if he succeeds, so much money will be saved, of course, and this will pay off maybe pension for the aged military personnel who are struggling. But do you also see it as kind of a strong anti-corruption measure?
Of course. Obviously, what CDF have done with regard to eliminating ghost names, there are two things. Eliminating ghost names and discipline soldiers not to be looters. You know, because they're looting the food of their own fellow soldiers. And this goes to the top leadership of the military. Del al-Kubar al-Chaghalim be-ta'alimat da. Akil jail asakir ta'alimat, you start akil asakir. And then some of them have more than one wife. They keep on diverting this food to their own families. And some of them have actually even a camp in the house. His bodyguards are itself is a battalion of another force. Those steps by CDF, I appreciate them. They are very good. They are steps towards transparency. Let's start one by one. Ghost names. If CDF is able to win the war against ghost names, actually that will also create a discipline within the function of the military institutions. So you will deal with these people who are corrupt. Sometimes lack of discipline in military institution, it is when corruption is at high peak. That even the normal soldier knows that so when you don't have a single soldier, a private soldier, cannot trust the leadership of the military, then that military institution is under question. So I really love and I like CDF in pursuing this seriously, and I wish that he should pursue the fight against ghost names in a transparent manner. What I mean by transparent, he should come from time to inform the public. I was able to investigate this unit, I got these ghost names, and actually if it's possible, let him name those ghost names, let them be published. So obviously we want to see whether these ghost names will come back again. Deal with this ghost name in a transparent way.
Someone may ask, but this question, you're not the right person to answer. They say, why has it taken this long? And what do you think are some of the challenges that could hinder the implementation?
You know, it is when you have a system of governance where individuals are fighting each other or paying back or revenge on mistakes, normally takes long like that. Is this thing new? No. Remember Honorable Aoud, when she was a minister, she pursued this. Where was the resistance? The resistance was within the military institutions. You see? And this is, I think, more than 5 years back. That's what Honorable Aoud did, is to set up, when she was a minister of labor, is to set up a system that there's no ghost names, but she was being fought. She was being fought deadly. Why? Later on she get the consequences on her. So when you have public governance, that people are governing themselves by revenging, normally such process takes long. And sometimes does not succeed even. He may start pursuing it. Soon some elders will come. Okay, Your Excellency President, you see, we fought with you in Chukudum, we fought with you in Wayabor, we fought this. Now these young men of yours, you brought him as a CDF, is coming to stop our way of milking. So can you cater for us? Can you provide us the meals in the house? And you know, the way my family is now, ajede suya dana gili goligo, and I can't bajeda saita, because all bitak data jibu CDF de, because yagi go fulu Ukula anabibta akel tanda de, and what do you mean? So we have two options. Either anna ya uo. Then you come to realize leaders of the country will call CDF, stop it. And this is normal how it happened. This is normal how it happened. Is that elders, people who are friends of the leadership, and that's what I'm saying, you need to have a kind of leadership that is assertive. An order is an order. Whether you like it, you don't like it, as long as meeting public interest, we go for it. So CDF may pursue this, but there will be some elders who are generals in the military that will come again, betray him, even they campaign him to be removed. And there are people who have lost jobs. They're even not losing jobs. There are people who have lost lives because of pursuing the same agenda like the one of the CDF. So come to realize, people start pronouncing what is coming, and then some will say even how clean he is and all this. You know, they start beating this around, and then you come to realize that he's taken. Another person come, and these ghost names that he's tried to remove will find their way back. It's the same like the arms that have been collected. Some of these arms have been collected in the hands of the population. Some people go and tell the president, so now we are vulnerable. The arms that we have in our hand, but then suya kedal kan be hame munfusan sa dia usilu mazolta keda jasa usilu mina ubiga sunu yazole ya hayatan na sunu again person no find a way of getting it back to them. So for me, this is the practice that we need to stop. So CDF can succeed when you have a political backup. CDF will succeed when there's a political commitment. CDF will succeed when there's a political will that let him pursue that. Even with the foot, the same thing, that he want to stop generals of senior ranking position in the military not to loot the foot of the mere soldiers. That also he can succeed when he's been backed up. So every civil servant like CDF or like IGP or like Director of National Security or like any commander in any garrison or like any minister or any undersecretary, any Director General will succeed in the work when he get that backup of the leadership, that what you're pursuing is under my principle of sitting on a leadership seat. Pursue it, and whoever comes to you, immediately immediately is held accountable. So for me, that's the work, and that's how you fix South Sudan. So one of the things that I'd like to tell you, if you ask me and somebody, the instability we have now, what are the factors that drive it? One of the driving factor for instability in South Sudan, it is this indisciplined and immature decision-making way of doing of administering public governance. You have people who are educated, people who are professionals, people who know what is right, but still they will act immaturely and they will act in discipline, and they are not held accountable. You see, this is one of the driver for instability. So immature politics, indisciplined politics, normally look at what happened in Sudan, where Sudan is now. Sudan is not now that because Sudanese love violence. No, because the level of political immaturity and political indiscipline have reached to the level that doesn't give a space for any democratic value to pave its way to secure public governance. So for me, that's one of the factors that it's not that because there's no federal system, there's no what. No, it is political discipline. So where in a society is where political discipline is high and where political maturity is high, it's what today we call them as a development country, or we call them the developed world. The developed world is developed because discipline and maturity is at the peak. Is something that leadership never compromise. But in our context, you come to realize that political indiscipline, political immaturity is being rewarded also. People are political indiscipline, political immature, they are rewarded. Now, when you reward haram, what do you expect? Masaraga become part of the business, sir. You reward thieves for stealing. My friend, even if I'm not a thief, I will steal so that I will be rewarded.
You can act with impunity.
Impunity, exactly. So when you start putting impunity to become a normal value of public governance, what do you expect? You expect these things to happen. So for me, it is a commitment of our leadership at the various levels to ensure that South Sudan is back. The question you may ask me, do we have an opportunity to correct all these mess that I'm pronouncing? Yes. How do we correct it? A single decision of the leader. Fixing peace and stability, fixing transparency, fixing respect of human rights, fixing rule of law in this country is all within the mandate of the president. One presidential decree on these values, they will prevail. As long commitment is there, will is there, tracking and hold accountable whoever undermine these decisions. Look at what happened in December. When we're closing the year, I'm quite sure in iRadio we can go to archives, we can find. When President was closing the year 2024 and opening the year 2025 speech, he declared a session of hostility, isn't it? He declared ceasefire. But does ceasefire hold? Now those who violate the ceasefire, were they held accountable? So now you pronounce the ceasefire and supporters violate the ceasefire and they're not held accountable. So for me, that is the move we need to take. And that is where I don't only blame anybody on top of the leadership. Yes, primarily I blame the leadership, but also the subordinates that intentionally opt to become indisciplined and opt to become immatured, or does things in a manner that is immature or indisciplined while they know that what they're doing is mistakes. So for me, it's a collective responsibility of people that hold the decision authority need to sit down and handle it. And one of the best way, let them just go for dialogue and ask themselves, how can we fix this situation? What went wrong? These two questions, they will answer all these concerns that I've raised.
Right. Talking about accountability and rule of law, so how should the government ensure that accountability and mechanisms in the army aligned with civilian oversight and the rule of law?
It starts right from the parliament. I was in a workshop some few days ago. People are questioning about independence of the judiciary, the separation between the executive and the legislature. My experience is that being exposed to other countries, if you don't have a structural leadership that respect this interpretation, that judiciary have to be independent from the other organs of the government, that parliament have to be the body that play an oversight role and should not be undermined, and that executive must execute decision of the oversight body. If you don't have that type of character that assert those values, obviously this can't work. For instance, let me give you an example. We don't have money for making anti-corruption commission work, but we have money for creating a cage for Freedom Hall. We don't have money to make Human Rights Commission investigate what went wrong in Nasser, but we have money to invest on court hearing. We don't have money to ensure that soldiers that we want to protect us remain disciplined, but we have money to look for other forces that can come from external. So we don't have money to show people that, look here, we are responsible for our own affairs. For instance, let me give an example. I've been looking into our tax system in the national budget. Of course, the financial year have gone already. We can't talk about the budget for this year. Whatever the case, legally, the financial year expired, we're going for next year. We are taxing influx of agricultural products like flour from our neighboring East African countries into South Sudan at a rate of 10%. And if this flow move within East African member state to another minus South Sudan, they are taxing at 35%. So what message are you sending? This is just a simple example. It means you're telling farmers in the other East African countries that you produce your food. The market is in South Sudan because the tax system is very low. And you're telling South Sudanese, don't produce food because these people will bring to you the food. So have you seen, instead of you raising taxes against things that comes from outside so that your people produced, we are not doing that. So for me, it's a whole setup that if we want to have accountability and transparency with the respect of the civilian oversight, is we must respect the parliament to function as a parliament. A minister is summoned to the parliament, the minister must report. But unfortunately, the minister will not report to the parliament, and the same minister continue to remain in the council of ministers, and leadership keep on hearing that this minister is summoned, he has been detained in the council of ministers, you see. So those who does not report to the council of ministers retain their position, those who report to the council of ministers are fired. So where does oversight comes in? So for me, oversight comes when the parliament starts functioning as a parliament. And by the way, whether the parliament is elected or the parliament is appointed, a parliament is supposed to remain as a parliament. I'm one of the person who does not believe on this thing that when parliamentarians are appointed or parliamentarians are elected, there is a difference in terms of the way. No, it is the way of how political parties discipline their members. We are running a country that like we're running an NCP
governed
parliament.
by the rule of law.
No, but imagine, you have a parliament that its caucus determine the behaviors of the parliamentarians. A party caucus discipline the whole intellectuals who have gone to school as MPs are being forced to adhere to what the caucus want. And who is the caucus? It's just a certain clique of individuals who doesn't want their interest to be pursued. They go and discipline the caucus. They say, look here, don't make this motion go. This motion is against because it's against our party member. Why do you undermine this? While our party member is a corrupt member. So why should you entertain him there? If even it's the executive, because it is opposite. You always succeed in administering public governance using democratic principle when party is able to discipline its members that it have sent to the government. But we're operating opposite. Actually, party members that are in the government are more powerful than the party. If Edmund today, I belong to party A, and party A send me as a minister of finance, I'm not powerful than the person who hold the department of finance in my party. I'm supposed to be shaking whenever he calls me, because that's the person determined for me to stay in the government or get me out of government and bring another member. But it's opposite. Actually, the party members in the finance unit are the one most shaking to me as a minister of finance in the government, which is opposite. It's supposed to be the party disciplining its members. Now, when party does not embrace its members to administer affairs of the public in a government institution for the common interest, will that party win elections? It will not win elections because its own members will either vote against the party or its own members will leave the party and go to another party. That's how political party function. But ours is completely contrary. That actually, if you are in the party, you feel you are so small, you are so weak, that until when you go to the government, now you start becoming big. Now imagine party members begging their members in the government, which are supposed to be the members in the government begging the party members. Access to the political party's premises, much more easier for party members than party secretary accessing his own party members who are ministers or under secretaries. They are so powerful. So for me, that is the way how civilian oversight will help the demand for accountability, for rule of law, for justice. Is when parliament function without any interference, when judiciary function without any interference, even when civil servants function without political interference. So for me, that is a culture we need to build. Where does this culture come from? This culture comes from a style of leadership that is assertive, committed, tracked, and follow, and discipline whoever want to divert out of that.
Right. Dear viewer, you're watching Around South Sudan podcast, and my guest in the studio is Edmond Yakani, who is a civil society activist and governance advocate. And I've been seeing your questions and also compliment on this show. I think I will be reading some of them shortly. The like of, some of you here saying you are Yo-Yo David, watching live from Rock City. And Charles, I think Yakan is speaking the fact. And yes, some of the questions are not appearing here, but I've seen 15 comments here so far. But once they open up, I'll be able to read them. But keep them coming. And if you have your question, do ask, and we'll be able to forward to our guest in the studio. Now, it's very tricky given a country that has been so much used to this kind of behavior, and it looks like it's really hard to inculcate values that really values that will define who South Sudanese are, values that will define principles that should really govern South Sudanese regardless of their tribe, regardless of the affiliations, the political, cultural, or religious. So it's kind of very tricky, and I just don't know how can we achieve those values, because the country just looks at kind of in a mess, and you don't know which direction actually it is taking, and everybody's just like
there's no pathway for us to walk out of this mess.
Yeah.
No, there's a pathway. It's a decision of 35 individuals who are South Sudanese, who occupy the highest authority, plus the leader, to make that decision. It's a council of ministers at national government level to make that decision. If our ministers today say enough is enough for this practice, and they say, Your Excellency President, this is the decision we're taking, let them take it tomorrow. Just tomorrow. Let them say enough is enough. This is the pathway. Everything will be fixed. It just needs a human decision. Doesn't need anything that we need to go for that. Now, when you take that decision, the next challenge you have is how do we sustain this decision? And that's why you need to undertake now a long-term strategies. How do you build up in the cultural way? How do you build up in learning institutions? How do you take to schools? How do you create things like Edmond should not be from Central Equatoria, he's only working in Central Equatoria. We can transfer him to Jongole. We can bring somebody from Jongole, take him to Melekal, bring somebody from Melekal, so that we feel that nationalism. Now, are there any case studies that tells us that there's options that we can walk away? My brother, yes, there's case studies. Let me give you one particular case study. That is very simple case study. Look at our national basketball team. Nobody think about how much Lualden have invested as an individual to bring this basketball team. Without the support of the state, by the way. When it started, the state comes in when results are coming out. So, if you today take that role play, put into every office in the public institutions, what do? We shall get the same results like the basketball team. It made us to sound SSD. And unfortunately, because we have this resistance culture, my brother, one thing I like to tell people that one of the biggest problems with South Sudanese is that we don't love our nation. Simply, During the time of the basketball game, you remember the last official game with US? When our players score, we all shout SSD, SSD when he score.
Right.
When the player miss, we not say sorry. The immediate question South Sudanese have is that Asma, Zola miss goal points there, Zola min win. They mean allowed win. Imagine, when he score, we are SSD. When he miss the goal, we want to ask where is he coming from. Want to dig out his tribe, his state, to say na mayade, ya karamal gunalomi na yakinazema beside nada. But when he score, we celebrate.
Right.
When he miss, so it means we need to change our attitudes. When we're facing challenge, let's not customize this challenge for a particular group. Let's face the challenge directly as a challenge. And this problem of customizing challenge require a position from the highest authority of the country, which is Council of Ministers with 35 ministers, with the president on the top and the parliament, and saying enough is enough. When Edmond mess, it's not his tribe messing. It's Edmond, and we must hold him accountable. And when we're holding him accountable, we cannot compromise. We need those decisions. That is the only way we can go through.
Right.
So it is not a cast that is paying or it's been nailed on a stone, we cannot break it. No, even the stone, we can break it. So for me, we have opportunities. The opportunities just need our current political class to sit down and say enough is enough for all this disturbance. We must pave a new way. It's very simple. So it's a matter of a single decision that is taken up, everything can be good.
Right. And
for instance, let me give an example. We said there's no money for paying Muslim, for example, our soldiers. Let me use our soldiers. But have you visited the hotels? Have you seen what type of food the top leadership of the security institutions are eating? Accommodations in the hotel rooms, what type of hotels are they eating? Now, how comes the top leadership of security and defense institutions accommodated in a hotel, eating well, drinking well, and the male soldier who's better with mosquito is not getting that same share? There's no money, no. It's just we don't want to commit ourselves to do things rightly for the best interest of every single South Sudanese, where the first single point South Sudanese start until the highest point where South Sudanese start. So we are not broke.
And that is the definition of leadership. Doing things right.
Exactly. So we are not broke. We are rich. We just decided to be selective, discriminative in administering our public governance. Finish.
Right. We just want
like look at you have MPs who are dying. They're not dying in Juba Teaching Hospital. They're dying outside the country, all receiving dead bodies. So you start asking, honorables, why don't you raise a motion to improve Juba Teaching Hospital so that we don't spend money? Sometimes he goes with $500 to look for treatment, he died there. Now we need to spend 5,000 to bring the body back. So for me, those are the things that we need to undertake. Those are the decisions we need to undertake. Very simple. You know?
Yes. 2 or 3 more questions here. Maybe quick one, as we're running out of time. Is let's talk about the order instructing youth in Warab and Jonglei to surrender their weapons to vacate the contested areas. So I'm just asking, how can the state, balance enforcing order with maintaining community trust?
It is very hard, specifically if that order does not embrace dialogue, if that order embrace violence. If that, I was discussing with somebody yesterday. I'm a bit disturbed, by the way, where we're using now gunships to discipline youth. One day some people use gunships for cattle raiding, by the way, because it's a new culture that we don't want it to happen. So what we need to do is that CDF have made an order. Immediately, governors of those locations are supposed to exercise a responsibility by taking the CDF order by embracing dialogue. Automatically, governors must direct commissioners. Where these boys are not living in a hell. They're not in hiding ground. They are in locations where there's a leadership. So immediately, county commissioners call this youth. And if they need dialogue to be embraced, people like us were ready. Religious leaders are ready. Let's go and talk to this youth. Now look here, you holding an armed, you undermining the function of the states. What's your problem? They'll give lists of options of their problem. You will ask them, okay, how do you want us to solve this problem? They'll give options of solutions. Now you come and sit down and discuss it without throwing, because even the bullets were firing. These bullets sometimes may bring some salaries to some of our civil servants, to some of their soldiers. Why should we waste that energy? That energy we're wasting for, like, look at what happened in Tonchi, is that people are saying, 3 times there's a gunship that went and spray bullets, but there's no casualties. So bullet where they come. So why don't we be disciplined enough? So for me, the best, and this is an appeal that I hope that people are listening to it outside there. I will ask CDF. CDF, we really respect and honor your commitment to ensure that peace and stability prevail in our communities. But don't take it in a violent way. Embrace dialogue. And we are ready at any time. I'm announcing using this platform of iRadio. If CDF want, we are ready to go talk to this Red Bell. We are ready to go talk to this staunch youth, and we create a room where we don't use a bullet to find a solution, but we use words to find a solution. For me, that we are there because we need to understand the reasons why they come up. Some of them even is a result. If you're not careful, by the way, some of these forces CDF is battling with, maybe they are forces of his friends. Some people close to him. Even sometimes people will credit to test his leadership. If you're not careful, the way he handled it may be actually a calculative game to take him out of power or to strip him out of his responsibility. Though we know that what he decided to do is for the best interest of the country. He wants to assert that under my leadership as a CDF, I don't want to see any indisciplined armed civilians that is threatening peace and stability of the common interest. We love that. We like that. But we need to find the best way to handle it. The best way, let's go for dialogue. The best way, let's approach. Let's listen to these people. Why are they discontented? And that's why sometimes I used to say the search for peace and stability should not be seen from a military angle. No. Let us also see it from a non-violent angle, from civilian angle. Because as we're speaking now, my brother, unity is boiling. There are military commanders from SSPDF, from IU that want to provoke situations to happen in unity because that's the way how they survive. Without shooting bullets and rockets here, and they're testing guns even in some parts of unity state. People are preparing themselves for war. Now, you ask why? Because that's the way how they survive. So we need to find a way of telling them, my friends, no, this bullet we bought with our tax. By the way, unfortunately, it is our tax that was being used for buying either tax directly from income that we have or tax from our revenue being used to deal with our lives at the same time. This is unbecoming. For me, let us try to take responsibility. The best way, let's go for dialogue. And I will really appeal to CDF to embrace dialogue. If dialogue didn't work, let us see. But dialogue will yield results if the dialogue is respected. And if the dialogue is not being undermined, that one we can trade off.
Testing weapons records or propelled grenades, I can't verify that.
Obviously, you can't verify that. But let me tell you, for us in the early warning system, unity is on standby. Some people just want to carry on and all these. There are field commanders there who are confronting themselves. Some of them are refraining. I know that some commanders of SPDF that are trying to hold back. That no, that's not the way we want to go. Provocation happening left, right. This provocation of left, right by field commanders. Where are the people in charge of them? If they assume that we're going to be leaders, that we are going to be standing before the state and saying, where are your leaders? So leaders have to assert discipline, have to assert maturity. So for me, that's what I would say. So I embraced what CDF want to pursue, but CDF should pursue in a way that makes us not to lose life. And my message is also goes back to these armed groups, that these armed groups also need to demonstrate a sense of responsibility. A sense of responsibility for responding for such call by also dialogue. Don't respond threat with a threat. Because I've seen somewhere where they're also posting threats. Then the question comes, who is who? Where is the state and where is the non-state actor? Is non-state actors? As you say, some of them are armed that even they can deal with the state agencies more than that. But all these behaviors is around political wrangling over the control of power in order to access public resources. Some of these groups have a very strong politicians that are in Juba. So Juba is the center of political indiscipline. Juba is the center of political immaturity.
What is your message to the citizens?
My message to the citizen is that let's not give up if it means some of these spoilers of peace, the profiteers of war, can claim our lives, arrest us, detain us, kill us. It's better we die trying, looking for peace and stability, not in a violent way. This is what I say. Let's try to get peace and stability, not in a violent way. Let's struggle to get peace and stability in a dialogue way. My message to our political leaders, why do you want us to describe you in this manner? In the manner that when you unite yourselves, you loot us. When you disagree, you killed us. That's a very bad description to our leaders, because that means books of history will put their names into very bad books. So we need to see books of history having their names in good. And everything that, for me, is just one thing that can turn everything to square one is the leadership of the country, is His Excellency President have the responsibility to make an order, dialogue should prevail. We can fix all this mess and we can walk away with a clean pathway that the world will celebrate us. For example, like what? Look at our football team of the blind men. The blind men football team registered a very big record. As we speak now, they have arrived from Kampala with trophy for the first time. They went for a trophy. They won the trophy. They brought for us gold medals. They brought for us the championship. They brought for us the golden hand, the golden ball, the golden player. Who do they defeat? Uganda, the host, 3-0, Zimbabwe. So If politics is fixed, we'll be the UN Secretary General. Just our politicians need to have the discipline and the maturity. Everything, 35 ministers have the responsibility, including president and the MPs. This country can be a heaven to everybody.
Edmond Yakani, civil society activist and governance advocate. It's been my pleasure hosting you, and in fact the insight into these discussions are really informative and good for reflection, especially for every person in this country, being a politician, being civil society, and being an ordinary citizen. It's been my honor having you. And dear viewer, of course, I do appreciate your time watching this particular platform that is around South Sudan, and we look forward to have another edition of the same next weekend. Please do have a very lovely weekend.
Thank you.
Welcome to Around South Sudan. You go to podcast for the stories that shape our nation.